It's time for the JMRA Football Podcast, a podcast for the fans by a fan. Yeah! Here's your host, Derek Jones.
Hey everybody, it's time for another edition of the JMRA Football Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Jones, and it is time to get you set for the 2023 NFL season. Chiefs-Lions kick things off on Thursday. We got a bit of a curveball on Tuesday as it pertains to that game. It appears that Travis Kelce, the all-pro tight end for the Chiefs, will miss that game after hyperextending his knee during practice on Tuesday. If he does not play, that's a big loss for the Chiefs. And without Tyreek Hill in the mix, going to Miami, heading into the 22 season, and now Travis Kelce potentially out for at least a week, that will perhaps crimp the plans of the defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. And hey, one of the reasons why we're here today is because we are going to preview the 2023 season with predictions. And just so you know, the Kelce thing kind of teeny tiny sort of factors in to the predictions, but I don't think it makes a wide bit of difference, and we'll talk about why coming up in a bit. But first, the social media rundown. We are on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Check it all out by heading to Joe Montana's right arm. Search for that on your social media platforms, and you'll be able to find our fun content. And I've got to say, it's been an interesting week on the socials because I posted something on TikTok, and, you know, of course, this podcast is named after the legend, Joe Montana, my favorite NFL player of all time as a kid. And as luck would have it, he is the subject matter of our first topic on today's show. It was revealed in a Men's Health magazine article that Joe Montana has his own ideas of who the best quarterback of all time is, and it is not who many people think it is, and that is Tom Brady. No. Joe Montana believes that Dan Marino is actually the GOAT, the best of all time. In fact, he says in the article, quote, put Marino in today's game where he gets free release and his receivers, holy cow, weren't very big. Now these guys are 6'4", 6'5". I think Marino is probably one of the most unsung heroes of the game. People don't talk enough about him or realize the numbers that he put up during the times that he put them up. Okay, so I'm going to get to the social media comments about this because this, I got to tell you, I have on this TikTok video I posted 503 comments on this. So suffice to say, this was a hot button issue online, and I'll get to that in a moment. But, you know, Montana's points are fair, without a doubt. And, you know, I struggle with this because my two favorite players of all time are Joe Montana and Tom Brady. And they've been doing this weird dance over, I don't know, I guess really probably, if you want to take it back, probably since the Atlanta Super Bowl. And I think it was at that point where people, by and large, had ceded that Montana had been surpassed by Brady as the greatest quarterback of all time. And to kind of give you an understanding of this discussion, you know, Montana was the king of the 80s. He won 4 Super Bowls with the 49ers in the 80s, repeated on a short list of NFL franchises that have won consecutive Super Bowls. And he established really the standard for play in big games by a quarterback. And, one of the blog posts I wrote years ago on JoeMontana'sRightArm.com was about how 4 rings was really the metric. If you were even going to get into the discussion about being the best of all time, you had to get to that number. If you didn't get to that number, Godspeed. You weren't really a part of the discussion. And what happened was, over time, clearly Brady got the 4th in dramatic fashion. That was the Seattle Super Bowl where Malcolm Butler steps in to intercept the pass by Russell Wilson. He gets the 5th Super Bowl 2 years later by overcoming a 28-3 deficit against the Atlanta Falcons in Super Bowl 51. Then he wins his 6th with the Patriots at the end of the 2018 season. And then he goes to Tampa and wins his 7th. And he almost doubled up Montana. And I think Joe Montana's a competitor, okay? And I think a part of this is that. I think a part of it is kind of like, hey, I'm still the only guy outside of Terry Bradshaw, that's a whole nother discussion, that A, has won 4 Super Bowls, but B, has never lost one. And, when you talk about LeBron James and Michael Jordan, one of the things that Michael Jordan fans will always lean on is, hey, Michael Jordan was 6-0 in the finals, LeBron 4-6. Fair argument. This is a little different. And, does 4-0 surpass 7-3 in Super Bowls? I don't know about that, man. I get it. Especially when you consider, I think it would be a little different had Brady lost in like blowout fashion in at least one of those Super Bowls. He didn't. All those Super Bowls he lost basically came down to either the final play or the final possession before the winner was decided. So I just really, I struggle with the idea that 4-0 is better than 7-3, which I get, but we're still saying Tom Brady won 70% of the Super Bowls he played in. So anyhow, let's transition off of that for a moment. Because, Brady reached what was thought to be the unreachable star. 4 Super Bowls, got to 7. Dan Marino, for all of his greatness, only made it to the 1 Super Bowl, Super Bowl 19, gets blown out by the 49ers in January of 85, never goes back. And I think one of the problems I've always had with Marino's career is that, not necessarily that he didn't go back, it was that he went a long time for quarterbacks of that era without going to the playoffs. Remember, he is a rookie in 83. They go to the playoffs in Miami. They lose to Seattle in the divisional round, I believe, if I remember correctly. Then, 84, they go to the Super Bowl. We already talked about that. 85, loses a horrible game in the AFC Championship game to the New England Patriots at home. Inexcusable. You cannot lose. I think when you talk about bad things on a quarterback's record, if you have lost multiple championship games at home, anybody can get beaten their building in a championship game. It happens. It has happened to almost every big-name quarterback you can think of. But if you lose multiple championship games at home, that's a problem. So he loses in 85 to the Patriots by 2 scores. I believe the final was 31-17. Here's where the issues come into play. 86, no playoffs. 87, no playoffs. 88, no playoffs. 89, no playoffs. Essentially, the prime of his career, and this is not all his fault. The prime of his career was mostly spent out of the playoffs after the first 3 years. Because remember, he goes to the playoffs in 90. They get to the divisional round. They get roughed up by the Bills in the snow. Then the following year, they have what is essentially a play-in game to get into the playoffs against the Jets at home and lose. So they don't make the playoffs in 91. So 86, 87, 88, 89, makes it in 90, misses in 91. 5 of 6 seasons. Now, I will place the blame in large part on the gentleman putting that team together, and that's the head coach. You know, Don Shula has the most wins by any NFL coach ever. But damn, did he do a disservice to Dan Marino's career. How Dan Marino, A, made it to 1 Super Bowl, B, misses the playoffs in the prime years of his career, 5 out of 6 years, is just, it's unacceptable. Unacceptable that happened to him. But that's exactly what happened. So the Montana argument for Marino is in part correct because the numbers, there's no question, he would have put up just bonkers numbers. And I think it is insane that when you have a discussion about greatest quarterbacks of all time, people will mention him, but, you know, it's a little bit after the fact. It's like after you've gone through Brady and Montana and Peyton Manning and Johnny Unitas, then you hit that tier where people bring up Elway, they bring up Marino, they bring up Favre, they bring up Staubach, they bring up now Mahomes, they bring up Aaron Rodgers. It's really I just don't see how you can say he's the greatest. I mean, the skill, there's no question the skills are there, the physical attributes are there. I think one of the things that drives me nuts is people saying like, oh, no one's ever done it like Mahomes. John Elway, there's nothing that Patrick Mahomes does on a football field that John Elway never did. But because of the way things are consumed now, everybody forgets what happened 5 minutes ago. So I think ultimately the takeaway here, a couple things. One, it's tough to really consider Marino the greatest under those circumstances. He did not deliver in the big spots in the postseason. Now, is that on his defense? Surely in part, yes. But again, no playoffs 5 to 6 years. He goes back to the playoffs in 92. They lose the AFC Championship game at home to Buffalo. Terrible loss. 93, tears his Achilles, out for the year. 94, has that playoff game against San Diego after it, ironically enough, ends the career of Joe Montana a week earlier. They have the playoff game in San Diego where they're up 21-6 and lose 22-21. I mean, it's really a bad list of things. 95, get blown out by the Bills in the playoffs. I mean, it's just was not good. It just was not good. And that to me, I think, makes it tough to really go over the top about his candidacy as the greatest ever. I think he is maybe the best passer ever, the best pure passer. But when you're talking about the greatest of all time, it's everything. Is it fair that guys are penalized because they didn't win? I mean, it's not fair, but it's reality. I want to read a few comments while I have a moment here, because I mentioned earlier there were 500 comments about this on the TikTok post I put up. And just to go through some of these, there are people who agree he was the best. Here's one comment. He was the best. No running game. The whole stadium knew he was passing and still couldn't stop him. True. His quick release is wild, and the power behind it, the only modern-day QB with comparable release is Rodgers. When did rings get in the equation of greatness? Marino is the best. Well, look, I don't see how it's not. It has to be a part of the equation. Winning, your job as a quarterback is to win. That's the bottom. You have to win. That's the bottom line. That's why you're here. Marino's 5,000-yard season record stood for 24 years. If he played post-2010, he'd have multiple 6,000-yard seasons. Fair. I grew up worshiping Marino, and he wasn't the greatest, but not till TB12 definitely and unequivocally took the reins and will never be matched. Never. Marino was that dude. I love Brady, but Dan is the best pure passing QB I've ever seen. See, there's a different distinction. If you're talking about who the best pure passer is, that's a whole nother discussion. Like, people get into this thing about who the best athletes are. Like, Aaron Rodgers is the most talented quarterback ever. I don't think that's the case either. I think there are other equally athletic / talented guys. Yeah. Teach their own. Let's see if we can give you a few more here. Joe is salty. Marino was a great passer, but Brady was better overall. The Joe being salty thing, I think Joe's very competitive. I think that's a big part of this. There's a great article written about Montana heading into the Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowl, really about kind of his state of things. And it definitely seems like he felt slighted by Brady. And really interesting cross-section of comments here in this TikTok video. TB is not in the top 3. Take a look at what John Unitas did versus other players' teams in his era. D-Man never had an elite running back or oversized wide receiver to complement his game. His defenses were mediocre at best, yet he put up huge numbers. Warren Moon was another great QB. He's got the numbers also. That is true. I think that's kind of the thing here. Marino doesn't get enough credit, and I think that's what Montana was really leaning into. And he also did indicate there's a distinction between best and greatest. And greatest is kind of suggesting it's the greatest body of work. Best is, no, you're the most talented quarterback ever. So I don't know. That's kind of my whole takeaway on this. I don't get into begrudging players their opinions because their opinions, they played. I didn't play. So, this is a guy obviously that was there. He did it. He knows what he's talking about. But I don't know, man. If I'm doing the all-time list, I'm not putting Marino 1. I will say this. Marino's in my top 5. Easy. Because, again, it's not his fault that his head coach wildly neglected the defense. I think in the 80s, there was a lot of that. Buddy Ryan did the same thing with Randall Cunningham. There was a lot of that, hey, we got a dude who's just going to go out and make plays. You couldn't, a part of it was you kind of had to deal with the situation you had as a team because there wasn't free agency back then. If you didn't draft well, you were out of luck as far as building a Super Bowl winner. There wasn't wild free agency to be able to fix your team just like that. So I understand those who are like, yeah, it's about the rings or whatever. I get that, but a part of this too is I do think Marino was dealt a major, major bad hand by Don Shula. Faux show. So I have Marino in my top 5 any day of the week. 1, a little bit too high for me, but I get Joe Montana's points. Dan Marino is wildly underrated. I do agree. Go back and watch his stuff. The guy was a lethal weapon in a time of no lethal weapons at quarterback. Like the only guy who had the arm strength that was comparable to him was Elway. Easy. But what a fun discussion. Hopefully, maybe we'll get into some more comments as we roll on down the line here during the course of the year. I'll have some more TikTok videos related to those kinds of things. I like to get the people involved. So good feedback from the crew over on TikTok. Okay, the main event of today's show. We are talking about who is going to win Super Bowl 58. It is prediction time as we get you set for the 2023 NFL season. Let's get to it. Okay, so shout out to the website playoffpredictors.com because you can actually go to this website and literally pick every game. It's crazy. You can pick every game and then it will shoot out the standings to you and then give you the playoff seedings, and then you can pick those games too. So here's what we have. Let's start in the American Football Conference, the better conference of the two. The NFC, I mean, you're going to hear this a lot from me this year. The NFC is just horrific. And the playoff field bears that out, but we'll get to it. In the AFC, I have a shocking three-way tie for the number one seed in the AFC, which we'll get to in a second. But let's start in the AFC East. The Buffalo Bills will edge out the New York Jets to win the AFC East with a 12-5 record. The Jets will also be 12-5. I have the Dolphins at 9-8, the Patriots at 7-10. And we will find out if the Jets will join the Bills in the playoffs in just a moment. AFC North. I still think the Bengals are going to be very tough to deal with. The key for the Bengals, they got to start out well. They don't start out well typically. They're kind of slow to get going. Even the year they made the Super Bowl, they're kind of feeling their way through the course of the season before they caught fire late in the year. And they kind of reminded me of the old Patriot teams where they just got better by the time Thanksgiving rolled around, and they were pretty much a pain in the you-know-what for the opponents come November and then into December and then into January. So I like the Bengals to win the AFC North again and go 13-4. I have the Ravens at 11-6. I have the Steelers at 11-6. I'm not buying all this Browns are good nonsense. I have the Browns at 5-12. Deshaun Watson has got to play better football. And until that happens, I'm not going to believe it's going to happen. So I am going to go with the Browns to finish in last place. I just think the Ravens, Steelers, and Bengals are just a significant cut above them. And I think, the Browns will get their licks in the division at times. They'll knock a couple teams off, but I just don't see them being in that clash yet. So I think you're going to have three teams that win at least 10 games in the AFC North. In the AFC South, this is a sneaky division this year, folks, because the AFC South plays this year the NFC South. Oh boy. And that may roll into the records here a little bit. I have the Jaguars winning the division with a 13-4 record. I look at their schedule. Now, they have some hard games, but all their hard games are at home. So that's a big advantage for them. So I have them winning the AFC South. I have the Titans going 11-6. I don't know how they're going to do that, but I have them getting there. Again, you play all these games against bad AFC South teams, and then you're playing against the NFC South. They're going to win some games. I'll tell you who will not win games. The Texans and Colts. I have them each at 3-14. I think both teams are going to struggle this year. The Colts, it didn't have to go this way for the Colts, and they are going to pay the price. They have a quarterback in Anthony Richardson who I'm not sure is ready for prime time yet. They don't have Jonathan Taylor now. We'll see where he ends up. That could shift things dramatically. I think if the Colts deal him, I think the Colts would be very wise to send him to the NFC and not keep him in the AFC. Okay, last division. AFC West. I have the Chiefs. Despite picking them to lose on Thursday night, I have them still winning the AFC West with a 13-4 record. I have the Chargers in second, 9-8. The Broncos with Sean Payton in his first year at 7-10. And then the Raiders, 6-11. So my 6 playoff teams in the AFC are as follows. The 1 seed will be Jacksonville. Yes, you heard correctly. The 2 seed will be Cincinnati. The 3 seed will be Kansas City. The 4, Buffalo. The 5, the Jets. The 6 will be Baltimore and the 7th seed. The last team to make the playoffs, poor Tennessee. They lose a tiebreaker to the Steelers at 11-6. It's the Steelers going to the playoffs instead of the Tennessee Titans. So I have the Steelers making the playoffs. On the other side, let's talk NFC and the dumpster fire that is the National Football Conference. So let me say this before I give the records, because I know this is going to be double talk and double speak. I would not be surprised if the Eagles-49ers NFC Championship game rematch does not happen. And we'll talk about why in a second. Let's start with our division picks in the NFC East. There has not been a repeat champion in the NFC East since, I believe, 2004, when the Eagles won it in 03 and 04. I think the Eagles in that drought this year. I think they're just a little bit better than the Cowboys from a roster perspective. Now, look, if Jalen Hurts gets injured, then this is off the table. Because you can sit here and give me this, the Eagles have the deepest roster in the NFL. Marcus Mariota is not that dude. So I think they're going to have problems if for some reason Jalen Hurts gets injured. And remember, Hurts has missed time with injury in his 2 years as a starter. Missed time in 21, missed time in 22. So we'll see how that plays out. But I think they're the best team in terms of talent in the NFC. I have them going 13-4. I have the Cowboys at 12-5. I'm seeing Giants buzz. Somebody in the NFC that made the playoffs last year, actually a couple teams, are not going to make it this time around. And I think the Giants are one of them. I have the Giants at 6-11. I have Washington at 5-12. I really want to believe in Washington, but I'm not sure that defense is legit, and I'm not buying the Sam Howell stock just yet. Let's go to the NFC North. The Detroit Lions will finish 11-6. I have the Vikings at 7-10. I have the Bears at 6-11 and the Packers 5-12. The Packers could surprise some people. I know I have them at 5-12, but I would not be shocked. If they get their act together on offense, they may have a chance. One thing to keep in mind here. Put a pin in that 7-10 record for the Vikings. We'll get back to that. In the NFC South, oh brother, the Saints win this one going away with a 12-5 record. They just play a lousy schedule. They should coast if they get competent quarterback play from Derek Carr. So I have the Saints at 12-5, the Panthers at 7-10, the Falcons at 6-11, the Bucks at 5-12. And then the NFC West, I may be going overboard here with the Niners. Because I think there's a chance the Niners might lose week 1 to Pittsburgh. But I might be going a bit overboard here. I have the Niners at 14-3. I think they're the most talented team maybe in the NFC. Certainly the most talented team not named the Philadelphia Eagles. So I have the 49ers at 14-3. I have the Seahawks at 10-7. The Rams at 6-11. I think the worst team in the NFL is residing in this division. There has been nothing about the Cardinals that I've seen that I've liked. Nothing. Zero, zip, zilch. Nothing. Nothing. So they'll win 2 games. So my 8 playoff teams, 49ers are the 1 seed, the Eagles are the 2 seed, the 3 seed will be the Saints, the 4 will be Detroit, the 5 will be Dallas, the 6 will be the Seattle Seahawks, and the 7 seed, the last team to get in the playoffs, will be the Minnesota Vikings. That's right, the 7-10 Minnesota Vikings will get into the playoffs. Oh, this conference is so lousy. What happened to it? I mean, I know Brady and Rodgers left, so that didn't help. But, I mean, geez, this conference is, not great. Okay, let's run through the playoffs here while we have a moment. I won't break this down bit by bit, but I will say this, okay? In the AFC Championship game, I have the Bengals getting there by a defeat suffered by the Kansas City Chiefs because Patrick Mahomes has never played in a true road playoff game until this year. It will happen this year. It will be in Cincinnati, and he will lose. The Bengals unfortunately, for the third year in a row, will be in the AFC Championship game on the road. And this time it will be in Jacksonville, where they will take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm going with the Bengals to beat the Jags. Lawrence versus Burrow. Love it, love it, love it. But I will go with Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals to reach the Super Bowl. Who will meet them there? Well, I'm going to chicken out here. There was a stat I heard today. I'd credit this to the great Peter King. And when I heard this, I said, you know what? I may pull back from this pick. But, hey, it's a prediction. We make them. We're wrong all the time. It is what it is. You know, Kyle Shanahan in 4 of his last 6 seasons has had to play 3 quarterbacks. Let me say that again. Kyle Shanahan has needed to play 3 quarterbacks in 4 of his last 6 seasons. That is crazy. So what that means is the odds are something's going to happen to Brock Purdy. And if that happens, then you can forget about what I'm about to say happening. I have the 49ers taking on the Eagles in the NFC Championship game. The Eagles beat the Saints in the divisional round. The 49ers do it to the Cowboys again for the 3rd year in a row and knock them out of the playoffs. Eagles, 49ers. But this time, it's in Santa Clara. And this time, it's the 49ers beating the Eagles to get back to the Super Bowl for the first time since the 2019 season. And we'll have our long-awaited rematch of Super Bowls 16 and 23, 49ers and Bengals, and I am going with the 49ers, assuming Nick Bosa shows up. As long as he shows up, everything will be peachy keen. But the 49ers have a tremendous amount of talent on defense. They have a tremendous amount of talent on offense. If they stay healthy, they're going to be a load to deal with, and I think the thing that scares me about the Eagles this year, tougher schedule this year, and I think because of that, they will be playing in far more physical games than what we saw them play in last year. They played an absolute cakewalk of a schedule last season, and it really served them well down the stretch, and eventually they get to the playoffs. They have an easy time of it with Daniel Jones again in the playoffs, and then they end up playing, basically almost every quarterback on the 49ers roster the last 20 years, it felt like, en route to reaching the Super Bowl where they lose to the Chiefs. So I don't have the Chiefs getting back to the Super Bowl. Very hard for a team to repeat. There has not been a repeat champion in the NFL since the Patriots did it to close out the 2004 season. So they successfully defended their title after winning it in 2003. They did it again in 2004. The other footnote to this, there has not been a repeat NFC champion since the Seahawks did it in 2013 and 2014. We know what happened after they won the Super Bowl in 2013. They got back the next year and were a yard away, basically, from winning a second straight Super Bowl, but Malcolm Butler, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And with that, that's kind of how I think the season is going to play out. We'll see how it goes. It should be a blast. And of course, we'll be back with you later on in the week to talk about week 1 and get you set for what should be a great, great 2023 NFL season. That'll do it. Until next time, happy football, everybody. And hey, enjoy the season opener, Chiefs, Lions. Happy football, everybody.